Well, hello, I'm Mike Festiva. Welcome back. In this video, I have about a year's worth of maintenance on my Suzuki Carry truck that I'm going to condense in this one video. It's going to be a long format video. We're going to cover 4 topics in this about maintenance on key trucks. Not exactly necessarily all of them are about the Suzuki Carry, and this is going to cover a lot of information about key trucks in general. If you are looking to buy one or own one, part sourcing and difficult to find parts. We're not talking about simple things like tune-up parts like distributor, carb, radiators, CV joint boots, things like that. Those are simple. You can source those on Amazon, eBay. We're talking about hard to find parts. Like for me, I've ordered a differential from brake drum to brake drum, locking rear differential I put in my truck, or say you need a whole steering column, technical parts like that. I'm going to talk a little bit more in the video about 3 different places I searched around. None of them are that great to deal with. It depends on who you get. Either you get a nice person on the phone or you get someone difficult. In no way did they sponsor this video. I paid out of pocket full price. I just want to help out the key truck community and point people in a few different directions. These companies have access to small key truck wrecking yards, so they can find you lots of different hard to find parts and pieces. From there, we're going to jump over to another problem. When I bought the truck, it didn't have much articulation in the back end, and after getting in there tearing out the rear axle, I realized that the shocks the previous owner put on were way too long and bottoming out. So we readjusted the shock mounts, and the lift kit and shocks the previous owner bought from a reputable source online that's well spoken on forums about, but they mismatched the most terrible parts. So I relocated shock mounts. We'll go into more of that detail in a little bit. Helped the articulation a lot in the truck. Third, we're going to jump over to CV joint, show some basics about changing the CV joint boots, because you're going to have to do that in any of these old trucks. And then finally, we're going to talk one specific problem that corresponds to Suzuki Carries in general. They have an axle lock button on the front dash, different than a rear diff lock. Axle lock still is an open diff, nothing specific about it. I've heard people, I got front and back lockers. No, you got a rear locker if you're lucky enough to have one. You got an axle lock, it's an open diff. All axle lock does is couples the front drive line to the front differential, so you can kind of shift in and out when you're in 4-wheel drive, shift on the fly, and gets rid of your hubs up front. But as these trucks get old, 33-year-old truck here, this last winter I started having the axle light come on when I was just in 2-wheel drive driving, and it would engage that front drive line hard going the highway speeds. It felt like it was going to rip the whole axle out of the truck. So I parked it until I could find some parts and pieces. There's some relays under the dash that are not even worth messing with. They're hard to find. They're hard to find on the internet, and they're going to be old. So I bypassed all that stuff, and I'll show you guys how I actually controlled the rear diff lock and the front axle lock with $15 parts from Amazon. So stick around, enjoy the video. So if you guys look back on the first mini truck video I did a few years back, I went to go get this truck. It said in the ad that it actually had a locking rear differential. Got there, it had the button inside, looked like it was a locking rear differential truck until I climbed under it before I bought it, and it had an open diff, not the differential lock actuator on it. I turned it down. I took off for the weekend, did some other stuff, and I kept thinking about this gray truck and how much I would really like to finally get it. It was in such good shape, so I went back and bought it, bargained the person down a little bit. Decided I'd run around with an open diff, and if I could track one down, I would. Bought the truck, brought it home, started realizing with the lack of articulation that having a locking diff would be key. Started calling around a bunch of different importers in the past, getting the run around. Oh, we'll get some other parts in the next few months. Call back in 2 months, call back in 3 months, that kind of a thing. One of the importers was G&R Imports. Called them like I think the first or second day after buying the truck, and they told me no, they didn't have anything like that, and they didn't make it sound like they would. Called around this other place in Florida called First Global Imports. Got a hold of them. They actually had a lot of parts, new and used. They were pretty nice, but they gave me the runaround and said, well, in the next 4 months, we're going to get another shipment of these parts trucks, so get a hold of us then. I got a hold of them, maybe another few months. It just wasn't going anywhere. They do have a lot of parts, but I never lined up anything. Finally called GNR back, and they said, yeah, I think we can get you one. They gave me a price quote, and then at the same time, I called another place called Smoky Mountain Imports. They got back to me, and that was a smaller business there. I decided to go through him. Funny thing is, he's got a business license, and he just buys them parts from other places at like a wholesale cost. And I could buy it from GNR, or I could buy it from Smoky Mountain for the same price. The funny thing about GNR was I was talking with a nice lady on the phone, told her I wanted a whole rear differential lock axle assembly from brake drum to brake drum. Made it very clear that's what I was looking for. She gave me a pretty good price on it. And then I ended up talking to the guy at Smoky Mountain, and I talked with GNR again, and I talked with the fella at GNR, and he had a total different outlook, attitude, did fill me in on the gear ratios, that the gear ratios between automatics and vans are different than four-wheel drive, 4-speed, and 5-speed trucks. So that was interesting, and that comes into play later in the story. But back to GNR, the fella told me the price the woman gave me was wrong because that was just for the differential itself. I didn't need just the pumpkin. I needed the whole axle assembly from brake drum to brake drum. That was a rear differential lock. And he's like, oh, that's going to be $5 something with shipping. Well, that's the same price Smoky Mountain gave me. Order it through that guy. He's a smaller business, rather support him. Turns out he has got a business license and just drop shipped it from GNR. So it came from GNR overall, same price. And I've been happy with it. It got the hell beat out of it when it got shipped up here. We'll go over that in a little bit. Back to the differential gearing. When I got my truck after driving it around on 4 low, on climbing around on gravel roads and slippery surfaces, it felt fine. But when you put in 4 high on gravel roads, it would kind of give a weird gallopy feel. Something didn't feel right. Had a sneaking suspicion that my gearing was wrong in the rear differential, especially it didn't have a locking diff in there anymore from Japan. So I ended up taking out one day on a snowy, icy road, and it was fishtailing like crazy. I just turned it around, took it right home. The thing was downright dangerous. At that point, I knew my gear ratios were off. So cool thing about getting this rear differential was the guys at GNR assured me that it would be the right gear ratio for my 4-speed truck. And sure enough, it was. Keep in mind, these trucks get imported and they might be able to drive on the boats in Japan, but they are just scabbed together sometimes. Like someone swapped a weird rear differential out of a van or an automatic in here and just sent it on its way. They come over with broken CV boots, bad tires, fairly scabbed together. So look them over pretty well because there's some funkiness that comes into play with these things. All right, now we're pulling off the ladder rack on my truck so I can get in my shop and let's start swapping in this different differential. So there will be a playlist down below with all my key truck content on it. One was building that ladder rack there. A lot of different working on them projects and a bunch of camping videos too, so check those out. So pull the drum off the new locking rear diff, and the brakes all look pretty good in here. Even looks like someone might have put a new wheel seal back in the back here. So we'll find out if any wheel cylinders stick. Everything should swap over. But one thing with this thing being shipped from like Missouri or something, it got the heck beat out of it. These backing plates are just bent like crazy. So I'm gonna go through there with the vice grips and straighten them out a little bit and start installing this thing. Yeah, like I said, those backing plates got the hell beat out of them shipping in the little box that this whole axle came in. Right here, I'm actually taking off this little jiggle valve. It sits on top of the rear differential. It's supposed to keep water out but let it ventilate. They don't work very good, so I'm just tapping it and putting a little barb fitting so I can run a hose up and under my bed. So if you go through water higher than a foot deep, you're not going to get any water in your axle. That's Andy from Olympic Overland. He's my brother. He's actually got a Honda Acti and a lot of good information about that key truck on his channel, from maintenance and fixing up different tires and rims he's put on it and lift. And he also built a camper for his. Right here I'm using one of these little electric ratchets. They work super good. If you don't have one of these things in your shop, I definitely recommend getting one. Here's the little actuator. I can't remember, something like a 5-port. I'll find the link and put it in the description below to Amazon where I got one of these. This is for my rear diff lock, and I got another one later in the video. I drilled this little center console for the diff lock, and that's where I later mounted an axle lock for the front 4-wheel drive as well. So I've been slowly eliminating the spaghetti of vacuum lines on this engine here, but I just cranked the truck over just to double check that that line has good vacuum on it, and I can hook up my differential lock to it. Found something in here.
Dude, what is that?
I don't know. People running away.
Maybe it's don't run away from it.
Explosion. Safety goggles are cool looking, dude.
Or Devo.
No burning. Yeah, Devo. Read something. We'll have to check it out. Routing all the lines up here for the vacuum switch. Got it all wrapped up. So that would be diff lock on. That's diff lock off. The cool thing about this vacuum switch here, there's no electrical, nothing to kind of fault out. And this truck doesn't get the best traction in two-wheel drive. So with this setup, with this vacuum switch, I can actually put in 2 high, 4 high, or 4 low. So if you're turning around and spinning in the grass, you can just pull this up, diff lock it, turn around, and release it. So vacuum lines come up through here. Gonna clean them up a little bit more tomorrow. Just got to rearrange my shock mounts a little bit. I got my shocks loose up here still. Just got to finish up a few lines down here, but it all actuates and locks and unlocks, so super happy about that. The previous owner put really long air shocks on here, and it's been lifted, so I don't think I can go back to stock, but they were bottoming out. They only had about 1.5 inches of travel. That was probably why my articulation was so bad. On the other side of the frame, back under here, is where the original shock mount is. I'm drilling a hole here and mounting the shock slight angle further. Not that exaggerated, but close. And here's some shock mounts I made on the lathe. Weld some tubing and should work pretty good. Go right through the whole frame here, get welded on this side and the other side, and should work. So I'll come back to those shocks in a little bit here and talk more about them. Right here I'm on a little hillside, actually pretty steep one between some road grades. Just showing the truck in two-wheel drive. Of course, I was trying to talk in the video, my microphone plug came out, so there's no audio on this part. But just trying to get up and down in this ditch, the truck's getting stuck. These things get absolutely hideous traction two-wheel drive with no weight in the bed. And so I'm just trying to get the truck to pull back up on the lower road grade. And here's a second attempt. You can just see it spinning. So we'll jump over to the clips and you can check it out. All right, we're gonna make an attempt up this hill. First two-wheel drive, then four-wheel drive, and then diff lock. Okay, two-wheel drive. Okay, first attempt, two-wheel drive. Not so good.
That's not so good, Al.
Try one more in two-wheel drive.
Not so good, Al. Yeah.
As soon as that rear diff loses any articulation, one wheel lightens up, it just stops. So can I shift in four low? Four-wheel drive, low range. This is my axle lock button. Here we go. Again, did pretty well, but as soon as we get this off-camber, loose terrain, doesn't want to keep going. Okay, diff lock on. All right, made it. So as you can see, it's a pretty steep hillside, and no video doesn't do it very good justice, but plus it's all loose and marbly. Ton of loose round rock on top of hard pad, so it's a bit challenging this time of year. It's actually a little easier when it's softened up a little bit with a little water and it packed in the dirt. So I parked the truck over here on a different hillside to kind of show. We got a bit of drop out here. I still have the tire off the ground at about 6 inches. You can see there's a kind of a hole, and then on the other side there's a mound. So there's not a bunch of articulation on these things. But you got this wheel tucked up into the fender a bit here, and it's up on this mound. But they're sprung pretty heavy to carry about 800 to 1,000 pounds of weight in a tiny little truck. So you can see the off-camber terrain here. This is where the rear diff lock comes in handy to be able to kick it on, because that wheel on the ground still has power going to it. This front wheel, you can see has a lot of drop out here, still touching the ground, but that back wheel, they ride so stiff. I'm sure there could be some leaf spring improvements done on the back, but it's leaps and bounds better than it had been. So I want to show a little shot of this, and one thing I thought of is today with those articulation and climbing that steep hill with the differential lock on, I forgot to air down my rear shocks. These were those long ones that the previous owner put on that were bottoming out. They're air shocks, and I have them pumped up quite high, which is going to affect my articulation. I just pulled my camper off about a month ago and forgot to drop the pressure on here. Camper is about 300 pounds, give or take, so I put a little bit of extra air pressure to keep the back end from sagging. Forgot to take that out, so it would actually ride a little smoother now if I would have dropped the 70 psi having those things or something out of there. But these are for a way bigger vehicle, and like I mentioned, the original shock mount was right here, and they're more of a straight up and down angle. I moved it not only up, but I moved it out quite a bit. So this is my mount right here. And so I went from an angle like this down to an angle like that. And what that does is, because these are bigger shocks for a heavier vehicle, it rode really stiff, even with all the pressure out of it. But when you relax that shock angle, I got more throw out of it. But also what I'm doing was relaxing the shock angle, which will make them softer. It's just a different leverage on the shock, and it will ride a little smoother. So I should drop the pressure out when I don't have my camper on here. But just wanted to kind of show you guys, it's about a year of having the shock angle like this, and I don't regret it one bit. It really transformed the way this thing rides. I can use the air spring system where you can put air in the back little Schrader valve and kind of ride level it if I loaded this thing down with my camper. But like I said, I need to back that air pressure off now that I'm just using it as a regular truck. But I've been really happy with that. Sometime I might jump around here and change something with the leaf springs. I get a lot of people telling me I flip my leaf springs upside down. This is how it was when I got it, and this is just how they are. This is an overload spring, and it's kind of funky how low it sits. You back up and hit stuff on here. I don't like it, but this is not upside down. This is how it's supposed to be. But again, I might try to get some leaf springs out of old Suzuki Samurai or something and change, put maybe longer springs on here, see if I can help with the articulation. I just don't want to lose the actual capacity I have on here. I can haul about 800 to 1,000 pounds in this thing, and it's nice to be able to have that capacity for hauling firewood and things like that. So I've been dealing with my axle lock light coming on and off on occasion, and if it comes on when you're going down the road, it sounds like it's going to rip the front axle out of the truck. And the button works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. It's been flashing on and off, and just randomly, you can't rely on it. And I hear by reading some forums that there's a little relay cluster somewhere under the dash, and I'm not going to go dig for that thing. I'm actually going to bypass it with a vacuum switch like I did for my rear differential lock. So we're going to jump in here and bypass it real quick. So here's what I got to bypass it. I have some of this leftover vacuum line from installing the rear diff lock. Bunch of fittings here, push connect, a T, and here's a 5-port vacuum switch. Same switch for like 14-15 bucks I use for my rear diff lock right here. So we're just gonna plumb another one up over here somewhere in the console and get rid of this problematic switch and the electronics going to it. Should be a lot more reliable. So here's my diff lock actuator. So I just got to plumb that other one up inside of here, and should have a really good working four-wheel drive with no electronics to fault out. So way up here, way up on top of the front differential, there's some vacuum actuator, or switches I should say, right up there. And there's a double diaphragm on top of the front differential you can't see. That's either pulls on the axle lock or pulls it off. So I'm going to get rid of this whole vacuum line set up here with those electric wires going to it. And you can see one of my blue hoses coming down from the vacuum switch right there. It's going to get routed down here and simplified. Got plumbed in. Pull this up. It's gonna be axle lock. Keep in mind, it's the middle of winter. I just started the truck and turned the choke off, so it's running really rough right now when it's cold. See the driving line right up there? Spinning my wheel. Now I'll go unlock it. Truck's still cold. It's a win. So there's the lines coming down. The diaphragm up here, the diaphragms are really hard to get to. So here I'm shifting into 4 low and clicking up the axle lock just to put it in 4-wheel drive. Real simple. Before you'd click in 4-wheel drive and the light would come on the dash if it was working right. In theory, you could turn it on and off the button, but it was always kind of intermittent for me. So wanted to have a nice, reliable 4-wheel drive that I didn't have to worry about any faulty electronics on. For me, simpler is always better. So I just want to add a few little mucky shots of cruising with the camper. This is from a previous video I put out last winter after we finished our little slide-in mini campers. These things weigh about 300 pounds and they sleep 1 or 2 people really well. Simplicity is the name of the game for these little campers, but just want to show we do really use these trucks. Right here I'm actually engaging the rear differential lock to go through this mucky ditch right up here. Trucks work really well. I've been happy with them. Like I mentioned at the end of the video, they're not for everybody, but they fit my needs pretty well, especially for working and hauling tools around my shop. And occasional recreating like this, especially solo style. So I know this is pretty basic tune-up stuff right here, changing oil, but it was about due last year when I was running this thing around, so time to do it. I figured I would include this. If you're not confident in changing oil in your own vehicle and doing this stuff and getting your hands a little dirty, you're probably not the right person for these key trucks. Definitely not recommended. You gotta know how to do some basic wrenching, and this is one of the most basic tasks you're gonna do. So I want to include this because this is a Bosch filter that was on. It was a 3330. And I cross-referenced that and bought a Fram when I was at the parts store. And this Fram is a PH3614. And I think this is the exact same filter that fits my Toyota FJ, which was kind of interesting. So put a little oil on that seal, put it in there. And this thing actually holds a fair amount of quarts of oil. I think it was somewhere around 3.5 quarts. It's a fair amount. So, yep, like I said, if you're not comfortable changing oil on these things, probably shouldn't be running a key truck because they're going to take a lot more maintenance than just that. Not like they break down more than other vehicles. It's just an old vehicle, and a lot of them have been heavily neglected in Japan before they got shipped out here. I don't think a lot of these trucks were on the road in Japan for a long time. A lot of people advised me that the service sticker on my window showed the truck was probably not on the road for 8 to 10 years in Japan before it got shipped out. So just a farm truck. So there's a torn boot. These are all really old boots. The lift doesn't help much, but the fact that these are, 30-year-old truck, I'm sure they've been done once or twice, but you can see these ones have been cracking, just old rubber. So we got new CV joint boots for this thing and some new grease to pack in there, and we'll get this thing wrapped up. So I don't have any manuals on this thing. I'm sure you can find them out there, probably on eBay or Amazon, but I've done many different CV joints in different vehicles, so you just kind of get in there and know the basics of it and figure out how each individual part comes apart there, and make sure to keep track of it while you're taking it apart. And pretty standard. It wasn't much to it to remove this. Once we get the CV joint out of here completely, we're going to jump over to going over the boots next. So here's the CV joint all pulled out. This is the upper boot that tore. This one was on the verge anyways. Before I ordered these, I just got them on Amazon. I'll put a link below if you have a Suzuki around the same era as mine. So it seems like Suzuki changed their CV joints at some point in the early to mid 90s. I have a 1990. These boots are for 1990, but it said to confirm there's supposed to be a part number stamped into one of these, and I could not find anything confirming that. So before I ordered these, I just cut the bands under the truck, pulled this away, measured this point and this point with the caliper, and verified that the stuff for the 1990 was right. But this is a pretty substantial kit. You get 2 uppers and 2 lowers, everything to the front, grease packets, and all the bands needed. And I'll put a link, like I said, to that. Gonna get this thing in the vise, remove these bands, pull this thing apart, clean them, repack them with grease, and get some fresh boots on there. So don't repeat what I'm doing here. Luckily I didn't break anything. Usually you can tap on these parts and there's a snap ring in there and you can separate the joint with just a snap ring. But when I got in there, I realized there was actually a C-clip. So the way they want you to pull that first joint apart is to actually, and once you remove the balls out of it, you can get to the C-clip on the other side of the joint. So for future note, this one actually was, the boot was never ripped, so I just packed some new grease into the joint because there's no grit, there's no tears in the rubber boot completely. And double measured the boots to make sure I got them. They're very similar in size, but slightly different for the upper and lower. And right here, I'm using a banding tool. You can find those on Amazon. I'll put a link to the one I have. I've used it for a bunch of quad CV joints and for vehicles as well. So just tightening down these special bands here. And then we're going to jump over to the joint that was actually torn here, just clean up with a bunch of brake clean, removing everything, any grit that possibly could be in there before repacking it with the CV joint grease that came in here. So once we get that joint all cleaned up, the one that was originally ripped, slide the boot on there. Now we're packing this whole joint full of fresh grease. Drop that on there, put the C-clip on the end of it that I messed up and taken apart, grease it up some more. Slide the joint over it. There's a big metal spring clip that goes in to hold that on there. Packing it up. Now we're just going to slide down the boot and band it. We should be good to go. Time to install. Everything went pretty smooth. Like I said, these are old trucks that have been neglected, so get used to doing stuff like this, and it's going to be a lot cheaper in the long run if you learn how to do this yourself than take it to a mechanic and have them do it. The parts, I think those boot kits were 50, 60 bucks for both lower and upper, and all the bands and grease packets on I think Amazon. I'll put a link down below for it. And there's some variation between truck years, so make sure to measure yours up and get them right. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, these trucks aren't for everybody. I definitely don't recommend everybody rush out there that thinks they're kind of cool looking and purchase it unless you're very skilled at doing your own maintenance, or you have a pile of money to pay someone else to do it, and you're good at seeking out parts online. You're not going to go to a regular wrecking yard, find parts for these. You're not going to go to a regular auto parts store and find stuff for these. And all your parts are going to be probably double what you're used to paying for domestic vehicles. But why go through all the trouble having a truck like this? For me, fits my needs well. It works good for hauling lumber around my place from my sawmill, using off-road driving, cruising around, exploring places. Fairly decent for weekend driving for me, not commuting, but just weekend driving for me to run back and forth to town for running little errands and stuff. Gets about twice the mileage of my Toyota FJ. It's super nimble. It gets around these tight trails up in my place way better than even a small sized Toyota truck would get hung up and have significant body damage cruising around here. Turns around super sharp in these woods out here. It doesn't take much to turn it around. It's got heat, it's got enclosed cab, fits my needs better than a side-by-side, and are still cheaper than a side-by-side, but they're not right for everybody. But I've been happy with mine. I haul tools on it. The sides of the beds fold down. I can use it as workbench, put chop saw on it. I'm always hauling stuff around. I even built a ladder rack so I can put metal roofing on it and longer beams and all that stuff. Fits my needs. It's not something you really want to buy for commuting. It's not something you want to keep as just your only vehicle, because they got a lot of downsides to them. But for me, I've been really happy. I don't regret the purchase at all. Almost ready to wrap up the video. Please do not click off yet, because I got some important announcements about the channel. In the last 8 months or so, I've been noticing a down click in views from my subscribers, so specifically subscriber based. I've heard a lot of other channels mention the same thing. YouTube is really pushing the shorts, the fluff entertainment content, like minute or less stuff that you just laugh at but you don't learn much from. Unfortunately, YouTube's been moving away from long format stuff for a while and educational. I hope these videos are educational. I hope they're entertaining as well, and I think we can find a good balance in that on longer format videos. But I think YouTube is trying to keep up with Instagram and TikTok and that fluff filler stuff. They're just kind of mindlessly scrolling. And unfortunately, they're not promoting longer format videos as much these days. They even specifically say to creators, try more shorts to get your views up and things like that. I just don't want to go down that route. I don't like the vertical format. There's a lot of things I don't like about it. So I'm just going to keep embracing longer format videos for the subscribers that want to see it. Speaking about subscribers, I got 240,000 now. And I always thought it was important to build your subscriber base, because the more subscribers you have, more the times chance of people to see your videos, especially people that click subscribe. Unfortunately, if you don't hit that bell notification when you hit subscribe, or go back and find my channel in your subscription list and hit the bell, most of my subscribers now are not getting notified that I have it. Probably about 5% are actually clicking and watching my videos. And that's unfortunate now, because I see no reason to grow a channel anymore, because if your notifications aren't getting out to the subscribers, and if my subscribers don't click on the videos, YouTube says they don't recommend them to new people. So it feels like the channel's starting to die. A year ago or two, I used to post a video, a wide range of topics, whether it's sawmill, mini trucks, building the mini 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐼, or a bunch of my other projects. I'd get 50 to 100,000 views in a few weeks on my videos. Now I'm getting 5,000 to 8,000 views in a few weeks on my videos, and they're just dying. They're just stopping at that. So unfortunately, it takes a lot of work, gear, editing time to make these videos and to put them out, and then not even have my subscribers, they don't even know they exist. I've had many people say, hey Mike, I didn't realize you've been making any videos anymore. I haven't seen anything in months, you know? And so I have slowed down on making content as much, just because like if people aren't watching it, it's hard to make it. So if you like the channel and the mixed content of just various different projects I've been working on and maintaining and fixing up and sawmilling and mini trucks and stuff like that, make sure to go back, click on in your subscription page and hit the bell notification next to it, because unfortunately, if my subscribers don't see it and don't click on it, YouTube does not recommend it to more of my subscribers, and they don't recommend it to new viewers. And it's always felt like the channel's been like chasing the dangling carrot in front of me, keeping me kind of keep going, keep you hungry, so you keep trying to chase that. I've been trying to grow a channel for 8 years now, and I'm kind of exhausted with the chase. Like, I'd be happy if most of my subscribers saw the content, whether they want to click on it or not, but at least give them a chance to see it and see if they want to click on it. So enough with the ramble. I just want to let you guys know, my actual long-term subscribers that watch towards the end, that's the dilemma I've been dealing with these days. And if I can't get the views back, I love that even 5,000 to 8,000 people want to watch my videos, but unfortunately I got 240,000 and majority of them aren't seeing the content. So it's been a kind of uphill battle with YouTube, and I just kind of questioned, you know, what kind of long-term format this kind of stuff I'm going to actually be able to produce on this channel. I may consider Patreon, but that's a whole nother beast I don't know about and I need to do a ton of research on. So, all right, long talk, but thanks for listening. Till next time, take care. Bye.